Wargamers, let's talk about Riptides in 8th edition. How you're going to want to play them, what their weaknesses are, what their strengths are, everything like that. So I got my Index Xenos 2 here, and we're going to go through it and basically pick it apart piece by piece. So before we do that, though, I want to say thanks for watching. If you like this video, if you like any of my other videos, go ahead, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and the notification bell as well. That way you don't miss any of my upcoming 8th edition battle reports or unit reviews. All right, so the Riptide, in summary, took a big hit with 8th, right? It got a lot more expensive. It's not quite as good. It's got some improvements, but it also has a lot of additional weaknesses now. So that said, it's not all bad news. It still has a role, and that role is as a highly mobile, relatively durable gun platform. So it does things that other units can't do, like Crisis Suits. Crisis Suits can't move quite as fast as Riptide. It moves a lot faster than a Storm Surge, and so it's kind of an in-between between Crisis Suits and Storm Surges. And that's how you should view this, is not as a unit that's going to take on every army all the time and be your #1 go-to unit all the time, but instead as just another component in a well-rounded army. So keep that in mind. All right, so Riptide. Basically, it has a 5-up weapon skill, strength 6, toughness 7 now, 14 wounds, 8 leadership, and a 2-up save. So leadership went down, toughness went up, and it lost some close combat abilities, right? There's no smash anymore, so it's not AP2, anything like that. It's not as good as in close combat, but it's Tau, so that's fine. The thing with Riptides and with all old monstrous creatures, vehicles, things like that, is that they have scaling traits. For the Riptide, it's the movement, it's the ballistic skill, and it's the attacks feature, but really we don't care about attacks because we don't want Riptides in combat anymore anyway. Not that we did before, but we especially don't want them in combat now. From 7 to 14 wounds, they have a 12-inch movement, and then it downgrades to 8 and 4 after that. And then it also has a 4-up ballistic skill, a 5-up ballistic skill, a 5-up ballistic skill. So really you want the Riptide to be operating between 7 and 14 wounds. Yes. So just like before, Riptide can take shielded missile drones, each of which has a missile pod on it. For the most part, you really don't need to worry about this. Instead, I would recommend taking shield drones from a different unit and just have them follow the Riptide around. Now, those shield drones aren't going to move as quickly as shielded missile drones. Shielded missile drones do move 12 inches, which is a really nice buff to them. It does actually make them a little bit more viable as a escort to a Riptide because they can move pretty quickly. But other than that, there's not a benefit to a shielded missile drone aside from having a missile pod with it over just a normal shield drone. So there's that, and a normal shield drone is a lot cheaper. So let's get that out of the way. The Riptide basically has access to either a heavy burst cannon or ion accelerator as its main weapon, and then a smart missile system, plasma rifles, or fusion blasters as its secondary systems. It also can take 2 items from the supporting systems list, and we'll talk about what you want to do for that in a minute. But its special rules are for the greater good, so it can fire Overwatch for nearby Tau units, which is nice. It has a Riptide Shield Generator, which is a 5-up invulnerable save. Vulnerable saves now are a lot more important than they were before. Invulnerable saves are better than they were before. Not as many units have them, and when they do have them, they come into play a lot more frequently. So having that 5-up invul save is pretty darn good. And yes, the way the Nova Reactor works is completely different now. Basically, instead of rolling a die and seeing if you take a wound or not from the radiation of the Nova Reactor and then getting one of 4 benefits, you now just automatically take a mortal wound, meaning that you can't take a armor or an invulnerable save against it. But then you automatically get access to one of 3 different benefits. So the benefits now are the Nova Shield, so instead of having a 5-up save, you have a 3-up save as an invul. So that's the same. That's still very good. In fact, better, as I mentioned before. Has the boost, so instead of moving 46 like it used to, because jump shoot jump is no longer a thing, it's been downscaled to moving 2d6. So that's pretty good. You're going to want to use that more often now, because the Riptide doesn't have access to a thrust move like it used to inherently. So this is your only way in order to get a movement outside of the movement phase with the Riptide now. Very good. Yeah. And then the third is the Nova Charge for the weapon. So your main weapon, your heavy burst cannon or ion accelerator, has different profiles, and if you activate one of these Nova Charges on it, it becomes a lot better. But they got rid of the ripple fire mechanic. This is largely because instead of having a twin-linked weapon, it has two of whatever secondary weapon it has. So instead of firing twice, it'd be firing 4 times, and that just isn't necessary. So having the 3 options is fine. Tau Empire SEP keywords: Battlesuit, Monster, Jetpack Fly, and Riptide keywords as well, meaning that it's going to be able to be targeted by things that do special damage to monsters or vehicles. But yeah, that's the stat line, and it is not cheap. It's pretty expensive. So let's go through all the options and figure out which ones you actually want to take and what's the most efficient. All right, so I compared the point efficiency using the expected wound calculations from 3++. Kirby and the guys over there did a calculation of the likelihood of each of these weapons doing a wound to various different enemy models. And I used that calculation, which gives you a good idea of the power level, or the output of these weapons, and I scaled it based on the points cost. So this gives us a general idea of the point efficiency. It gives us an idea of how much bang for your buck you get, because in army construction, it's not necessarily how many bucks you get or how many bangs you get. It's about the ratio of bangs to bucks or wounds to points, basically. We want to get as many wounds for as few points as possible. All right, so if we look at this, the burst cannon, the heavy burst cannon, is actually almost always better than the ion accelerator as the standard shot. The ion accelerator has the standard shot, it has an overcharge shot, it has a Nova Reactor shot, and under that standard shot, it is inferior to the heavy burst cannon that is also standard and not Nova charged. The heavy burst cannon will always be more points efficient if you don't do anything else to it. However, when you start Nova charging or adding support systems, the ion accelerator actually becomes more points efficient for high toughness targets, which we would expect. We would expect that an ion accelerator, which is a higher strength, higher AP value, does more damage, would be better at targeting high toughness models. And that actually happens when you Nova charge it. But if you don't Nova charge it, if you take it standard, it's actually more efficient to take a heavy burst cannon just because of the volume of fire. So which one is better? Which one do you actually want to take? On one hand, you have the points efficiency of the heavy burst cannon compared to the utility of the ion accelerator. And again, we have to come back to the idea of what is this unit's unique ability? What is this unit going to be doing that other units can't do? And the answer to that is heavy firepower. So the ion accelerator is going to be, in my opinion, a better choice than the heavy burst cannon on a Riptide, because the heavy burst cannon does a lot of things that other units can do better. So don't bother with that. Let those other units specialize in taking care of lighter units, infantry, things like that, and have your Riptide focus on heavier units. So if we look at the heavy burst cannon, crisis suits, and check out my crisis suit review if you haven't already, there's a link to that in the description below. Crisis suits, if you load them out with plasma rifles, fusion blasters, things like that, they're going to be between 2 and 10 times more efficient than a Riptide is at taking out low toughness units. They just are. So, you know, if you're at the 2 times more efficient end of that spectrum, you are not having as many wounds or the durability of a Riptide. But if you're at the 10 times more efficient end of that spectrum, that's 30 crisis suit wounds with a 3-up save. And that's just a lot better than 1 Riptide. 30 crisis suit wounds or 10 crisis suits is going to be better than a single Riptide for the points. Now, moving on to the Ion Accelerator, really this places it as an alternative to a Storm Surge or a Hammerhead. It makes it as this high mobility, relatively high durability gun platform. Just like I said at the beginning, the Ion Accelerator is really going to be your key. And so that's going to be your primary weapon. Your secondary weapon then, because we're using this as a targeted gun platform, is probably going to be a Fusion Blaster. That's going to be the more efficient choice, and it's going to, you know, give a bigger punch. The plasma rifle and the smart missile systems just aren't going to be as useful for the things that you're targeting with a Riptide, or the reason why you're bringing a Riptide in the first place. So, Ion Accelerator and Fusion Blaster, and then all we have left is support systems. What would we want to bring? Well, we can only take 2, which is too bad because there's a few in here that would actually be really useful for a Riptide. The 3 that are kind of on the top of my list are multi-trackers, target locks, and stimulant injectors. And each of them has a certain level of viability. Target locks are almost necessary because Riptides no longer have the relentless rule. So that means that if they move, they're going to be suffering a penalty to hit for firing their heavy weapons. So that's going to be your Fusion Blaster, and your Ion Accelerator is going to have a -1 to hit. So even at full health, you're going to be needing 5s to hit, and as soon as you lose more than 7 wounds, you're going to be needing 6s to hit. You know, some of that can be alleviated by marker lights, but really we want to limit that. So target lock, great investment. Absolutely take a target lock. Stimulant injectors are also very important. You have enough wounds on a Riptide that you're going to have plenty of opportunities to use your stimulant injector. Basically how that works is on a 6-up, you can recover a wound. So you can use that in place of, or actually in addition to your normal wound or your normal save. So even if you take a mortal wound, you can still use the stimulant injector benefit to recover that wound. So every 6 mortal wounds you take, on average, you're going to recover 1. It means you're going to save yourself a couple of wounds by taking the stimulant injector. And depending on when that happens, that can make the difference between you hitting on a 4 and on a 5, or having a 12-inch movement or an 8-inch movement. And that's a big deal. So having access to a stimulant injector is really nice, and it can kind of allow you to get all the benefit of a Nova charge and potentially not pay any of the cost if you're able to recover that Nova charge wound. So stimulant injector and target lock, I think, are going to be your number 1 option, but there's a second option that you could take, and that would be taking a multi-tracker, which reduces your marker light dependence and allows you to re-roll ones if you're firing all your weapons at the same target, which I think you're going to want to do most of the time. And that's good. That means that you don't need to worry about marker lights as much, and it makes the Riptide in general more effective, but it is slightly redundant. So again, it's something that you'll want to consider if you don't have a lot of marker lights in your army, if you're worried about having to bring sources of marker lights in terms of pathfinders or drones or anything like that. You can take a multi-tracker on your Riptide instead, and that can also help your army be a little bit more quick to deploy depending on the rest of your configuration. All right, so there's that. Really, I'd recommend Ion Accelerator with Fusion Blasters, Target Lock, and Stimulant Injector. Pretty similar loadout to what we had in 7th and 6th edition, but with some minor changes, and it really is going to play much differently now. Overall, we're looking at the Riptide not as this jack of all trades, awesome unit that it used to be. We're looking at it as a poor man's Storm Surge in some ways, or a durable objective capturer, but not as something that's just going to be the backbone of your army. And that's okay. It still has a place. So you're going to want to take a Riptide when you just don't have enough points for a Storm Surge, or if you already have a Storm Surge and want some mobility, something like that, is when you're going to want to take a Riptide. The benefit to it is that it doesn't, it can move quickly, and while it's true that some of these functions can be performed by crisis suits or other fast-moving units, the Riptide is going to potentially be able to stay around longer than some of those other units, partially due to its large number of wounds, also due to its ability to take a 3-up invulnerable save and have access to stimulant injectors, all without letting go of any type of firepower, which crisis suits can't do. So this is the role for Riptides, is being able to move around the battlefield and grab objectives. But yeah, that's really it. I think Riptides are decent. You're not going to see them all the time, but they can be an effective component of a well-rounded army. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Try it out. If it goes well for you, let me know. If it goes poorly for you, still let me know. But other than that, thanks for watching, and of course, happy wargaming.